Begin by setting the scene of your childhood, how everything seemed normal from the outside, but behind closed doors, you and your sister lived in fear under the control of an abusive father. When I look back on my childhood, people often expect warm memories, bike rides in the summer, bedtime stories, birthday parties filled with laughter. But for me and my little sister, the truth was something far more difficult to speak about. From the outside, our life looked ordinary. Our house stood in a quiet neighborhood. My father had a job. We went to school every day, we wore clean clothes, and we even smiled in family photos. But behind those closed doors, it was a different world. A world filled with fear, silence, and secrets no child should ever have to carry. It's hard to explain what it's like to live in a constant state of alert. As kids, we knew exactly how the floorboards creaked. We memorized which doors closed quietly and which ones might slam too loud. We learned to read the slightest change in our father's tone of voice, the way his jaw tightened, or how long he stared at us before saying anything. Sometimes the warning came in a whisper. Other times it came too late. There was no telling what might set him off. A glass left on the table, a toy out of place, a grade that didn't meet his standards. And when it happened, the punishment wasn't just physical. It stripped us of our voices, our safety, our sense of being children. My sister was only 5 the first time I remember it happening to her. I was 7. I watched from the hallway, frozen, my fingers clenched around the doorframe as he yelled at her for something. Something so small, I can't even recall what it was. What I do remember is her eyes, wide with confusion, as he pulled her by the arm. I remember her crying. And I remember doing nothing. Because I didn't know what to do. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I stayed invisible, maybe it would stop. But it didn't stop. It became our normal. We stopped inviting friends over. We never asked questions. We walked on eggshells. We tried to be perfect. We thought if we just followed the rules, his rules, we could avoid the worst of it. But perfection was never enough. There was always something. A look, a word, a gesture too loud or too slow. And when the anger came, it came fast and without warning. No explanation. No apology. Just bruises that faded and words that didn't. For years we kept it to ourselves. We didn't have the words to explain it. And even if we did, who would believe us? He was our father. He was respected in our community. He smiled at neighbors and waved to teachers. But in our home, the truth was hidden behind silence. The kind of silence that presses down on your chest and teaches you not to cry, not to speak, not to feel. I became protective of my sister in a way no child should have to be. I'd try to distract him, take the blame, make myself the target so she wouldn't have to be. I'd lie awake at night listening to her breathing in the bed across from mine, trying to reassure myself that she was okay, even if I wasn't. We lived in that shadow for years. And the scariest part wasn't just what he did. It was how normal it became. How we adjusted to it, how we swallowed it down and learned to live with it. That's what abuse does. It doesn't just hurt you in the moment. It rewires your understanding of love, trust, and safety. You begin to question your own instincts. You begin to think maybe this is just how life is. But deep down, some part of me always knew it wasn't right. I didn't know what a healthy home looked like, but I knew this wasn't it. Still I stayed quiet. We both did. 'Cause we were scared. 'Cause we were alone. Because we didn't know there could be anything different. We just wanted to survive. There's something deeply unfair about how children carry pain. We don't have the words for it, we don't understand it, and worst of all, we often think it's our fault. That's what happened to me and my little sister. We weren't just living through abuse. We were trying to survive it without even knowing what it really was. At that age, you think parents are supposed to be right. You think they know everything. So when they hurt you, you don't ask why. They do it, so it must make sense. You convince yourself it's normal. You convince yourself you deserved it. There were days when I genuinely believed I was the problem. That I wasn't good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough. I thought if I just got better grades, cleaned up more, made less noise, maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't get angry. But that kind of hope is exhausting. Because it's not rooted in truth. It's rooted in fear. And fear becomes a habit. You start anticipating everything before it happens. You analyze every footstep, every glance, every slight change in the air around you. You never feel settled. Never feel at ease. Even when things are quiet, you're just waiting for the moment it won't be. And when he did explode, when the yelling started or the belt came off the hook, there was no warning. No reason that made sense. It was always sudden, loud, violent, and then over like a storm that passed too fast for anyone to react. Except for us, we were left in the wreckage. My sister would curl up in her room afterward, knees to her chest, silent. I'd sit outside her door sometimes listening, not knowing what to say, because I didn't have answers either. I just knew I had to be strong for her. I was the big sister. That was supposed to mean something. But how do you protect someone when you're just as broken? Sometimes the bruises showed. A mark on the arm, a cut on the lip, a red welt that wouldn't fade quickly enough. We got good at hiding them. Long sleeves. I fell. I bumped into the table. The thing is, after a while no one asks. Or maybe they do, but not loud enough to make a difference. Adults saw us. Teachers, neighbors, relatives. They noticed we were quiet, that we jumped at loud sounds, that we never wanted to go home. But no one stepped in. And we didn't know how to ask for help. We didn't even know help was an option. That's what I mean when I say it was a silent struggle. It was this constant, invisible war happening inside of us, with no one to fight for us and no way to fight back. And I think that's one of the cruelest parts of what we went through. How alone it felt. How we were trapped in a world that looked fine from the outside but was slowly crushing us from the inside. I became so good at pretending, smiling at school, finishing my homework, laughing when other kids told jokes. But inside I felt like I was disappearing. Like each day was just about making it through without causing trouble, without making noise, without being seen. Because being seen meant being punished. Being noticed meant becoming a target. So we kept our heads down. We tried to disappear. And somehow, even that didn't keep us safe. There were nights when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to imagine a different life. One where we could talk, where we could laugh without fear. One where bedtime wasn't a countdown to another explosion. I didn't dream of riches or toys or big things. I dreamed of peace. I dreamed of sitting at a table and not flinching when someone raised their voice. I dreamed of my sister smiling like a child, not the way she did. Nervous, cautious, always checking to see if it was okay to smile at all. Sometimes I still wonder what kind of people we could have been if we hadn't spent so many years afraid. What we lost in those quiet, broken moments. But I don't stay there too long. Because I know now that surviving that darkness, enduring it, carrying it, and still holding on to love, that's its own kind of strength. And no matter how small we felt, no matter how powerless we were, we never let go of each other. In that silence, in that pain, we held on. And that saved us. I'll never forget the day everything changed. It wasn't some dramatic rescue like you see in movies. There was no big confrontation, no police sirens or shouting. It happened quietly like so much of our life up to that point. But this time it brought something we hadn't felt in years. Hope. My grandmother had always been in our lives. Just enough to keep a thread of warmth running through the cold. She didn't live nearby, so we only saw her occasionally. Holidays, birthdays, the odd visit when she could. But even as a kid, I noticed something about her presence. When she was around, my father behaved differently. Not for long, but enough. He dialed it down. She brought this light with her, a kind of strength that even he seemed wary of. And maybe that's why he didn't let her come too often. Maybe he sensed that if she looked too closely, she'd see through the mask he wore in public. And she did. It wasn't one moment that revealed everything to her. It was a collection of moments. Subtle but sharp, like broken glass just under the surface. I remember one weekend when she came to visit. I was maybe 10 by then, and my sister was still so little, still trying to make herself invisible. Grandma showed up unexpectedly, said she missed us and had brought homemade soup. My father was annoyed. He covered it with a smile, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. He stayed anyway. And that night something must have shifted. I don't know if it was the way my sister clung to her and wouldn't let go, Or how I barely spoke at all, scared I might say the wrong thing. Maybe it was when she saw my sister flinch at a sudden sound, or when she tried to hug me and I froze like it wasn't safe. She didn't ask a lot of questions right away, but I think her heart already knew. She was putting the pieces together, quietly, gently, but with focus. The next morning, she made us breakfast while my father was still asleep. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, watching her hands move, listening to the eggs sizzle, and feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Calm. I didn't know then that this would be the last time I'd eat in that house. I just knew that for those few moments it felt safe. Later that day, she asked my father if she could take us out. Just the three of us. Said she wanted to spend some time with her granddaughters, take us for ice cream, maybe walk by the park. He hesitated, he always wanted control, but he let us go. I don't think he suspected anything. He still believed he had us so tightly wrapped in fear that we wouldn't speak. But we didn't need to. Grandma already knew. We never went back that day. I didn't realize it until much later, but she had already been making arrangements behind the scenes. That quiet visit was part of a bigger plan. She had talked to people, made calls. She didn't scream or confront, she protected. And in doing so, she did something no one else had ever done for us. She saw us. I remember sitting in the back seat of her car, my sister holding my hand so tightly it hurt, and hearing Grandma say, "You're safe now. You don't have to go back." I didn't believe it at first. I didn't know how to believe it. I thought maybe she was just taking us for a few days, maybe to let things cool off. But she meant it. She meant forever. She didn't wait for someone else to fix it. She became the person who would. It couldn't have been easy for her. She was older, she lived alone, and she had already raised her children. But she took us in without hesitation. She didn't see it as a burden. She saw it as a promise. A promise to love us the way we deserved to be loved. She never once asked us to explain everything. She just let us be kids again. Slowly, carefully, on our own time. She gave us space to cry, to yell, to ask questions, or to say nothing at all. She was patient with our nightmares, our silence, our guarded hearts. And little by little, that safety began to take root. It's strange how one person can change the entire course of a life. One decision. One act of love. One refusal to turn away. And that's exactly what she did. She didn't turn away. Moving in with Grandma wasn't just a change in address. It was like entering another world. A world where the air didn't feel heavy, where footsteps didn't echo with fear, where the silence wasn't threatening. It was strange at first. You'd think we would have felt instant relief, but the truth is, safety felt unfamiliar. We didn't know what to do with peace when it finally arrived. The first few nights were the hardest. Even though we were out of that house, the fear had followed us like a shadow. My sister still slept curled into a ball, clutching a stuffed animal so tightly I thought it might tear. I stayed up late, listening for sounds that weren't there, waiting for shouting, for doors slamming, for someone to come into the room. But instead, all I heard was the hum of Grandma's old refrigerator, and the soft tick of the clock in the hallway. She never pushed us to talk. That was the first gift she gave. She didn't sit us down and demand answers or explanations. She let us be quiet. She let us be confused. She let us grieve the strange reality we had escaped from. And in the smallest ways she started to build something for us, something soft, steady, and strong. Every morning she'd make breakfast. Nothing fancy, just toast and eggs or oatmeal with cinnamon, but it was always there. Consistent. Warm. It was in those tiny rituals that healing began. She asked what we wanted to eat. She let us choose. That alone was a shock, being given a voice, a choice. And when my sister spilled her juice one morning, we both froze. I reached for a towel like it was an emergency, like we had to fix it fast before someone got angry. But Grandma just smiled and said, "It's okay, sweetheart. It's just juice." And then she cleaned it up like it was nothing. 'Cause it was nothing. Moments like that chipped away at the fear. We had been so used to punishment, to perfection being the only way to stay safe, that even the smallest grace felt like a miracle. She made her home our home. Not just by giving us space, but by giving us permission to exist fully within it. We didn't have to shrink ourselves anymore. We didn't have to earn love through silence or obedience. We were allowed to be messy, loud, silly, tired, emotional, human. She started teaching us things too. Not just how to bake cookies or plant flowers in the yard, but how to breathe, how to feel, how to trust. I remember one afternoon when I got overwhelmed at school. I came home crying, unable to explain why. And instead of dismissing it or asking what I did wrong, Grandma just pulled me into her arms and said, "It's all right. You don't have to explain it. I'm here." And I cried harder, because it had been so long since someone had been there without needing anything in return. She showed up for us every single day. Doctor's appointments, school meetings, helping with homework. She wasn't just filling in. She stepped in like she had always been meant to be there. Like she had been waiting her whole life to protect us. And even when she was tired, even when her back ached or her knees hurt from gardening, she kept showing up with love so loud it drowned out the echoes of everything we had been through. But it wasn't just what she did, it was who she was. She never treated us like we were damaged or fragile. She saw the strength in us, even when we didn't see it ourselves. She reminded us that what we had lived through didn't define us, but what we did with our lives going forward, that was ours to claim. And she didn't do it alone. She reached out. She found a counselor who worked with kids who had experienced trauma. She got involved at our school. She built a little circle of people we could trust. Bit by bit, she helped us create a new life, a new version of family, shaped by kindness and patience and stability. The kind of family where you could speak up and not be punished. Where you could cry and still be loved. Where you could be yourself and still feel safe. Took time, years really, but we began to believe again. To believe in safety, in love, in the possibility that our story didn't have to end in fear. My sister started laughing again, a real laugh, not the nervous kind. I started writing, expressing things I hadn't known how to say. We weren't healed overnight, but we were healing, and that was everything. And through it all, Grandma stood at the center of it. Not with grand speeches or dramatic gestures, but with quiet courage, unwavering love, and the kind of presence that made everything feel possible. Healing is not a straight path. It's messy, uncomfortable, and often invisible to everyone except the person going through it. I used to think that once we got out of that house, once we were physically safe, everything would get better. And in some ways it did. But what I didn't understand as a child was that the damage doesn't stop just because the abuse does. The real work started afterward, in the quiet moments, in the years that followed. That's when the wounds we couldn't see began to rise to the surface. I had so many questions. Why didn't anyone help sooner? Why did someone who was supposed to love and protect us become the very reason we were afraid to wake up each morning? And maybe the hardest one of all, was any of it my fault? I didn't say those questions out loud for a long time. I carried them around, tucked behind polite smiles and good grades, trying to prove I was okay, even when I wasn't. My sister coped differently. She shut down, built walls so thick even I couldn't always reach her. Some days she would stare at nothing, her eyes lost in a memory I couldn't pull her out of. Other days she would cry over something small, and I'd know it wasn't about the spilled milk or the broken crayon. It was about everything we had lived through that still lived inside of us. But the difference now was that we had Grandma. And we had time. We had space to fall apart without punishment. We had the safety to unpack what had been buried for years. Grandma encouraged us, not by forcing us to talk, but by listening when we were ready. She found us a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma. I didn't want to go at first. I was scared of what would come up, scared of facing things I'd spent so long trying to forget. But the woman I met in that quiet little office didn't rush me. She let me speak in fragments. She helped me name things I didn't even realize I'd been feeling. Shame, guilt, rage, fear. And slowly, she helped me realize those feelings didn't make me weak. They made me human. Took time. I don't want to make it sound easy. Healing is not a single moment. It's 1,000 small choices to keep going, even when you're tired. It's learning to forgive yourself for the things that were never your fault. It's understanding that being a survivor doesn't mean the pain disappears. It means you learn to carry it differently. There were nights I still woke up panicked, hearing echoes of his voice in my dreams. There were days I doubted my worth, wondered if the damage was too deep. But each time Grandma was there, not always with answers but always with presence. And that mattered more than anything. She reminded us that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to let what happened define the rest of our story. My sister and I leaned on each other in new ways. We learned how to talk again, not just about what had happened but about what we wanted from life. She found comfort in music. I found it in writing. And somewhere in the quiet, in the space between fear and forgiveness, we started to grow into who we were always meant to be. There were moments of joy that used to feel impossible. Dancing in the kitchen with Grandma to old songs on the radio, laughing so hard we cried, celebrating small victories like making it through a full week of school without a panic attack. These might sound ordinary to someone else, but to us they were proof. Proof that joy could return, that trust could be rebuilt, that life could be lived instead of just survived. Healing also meant letting go, not of the memory but of the power it held over us. It meant acknowledging the past without letting it decide our future. And for me it meant learning how to love without fear. To believe that not every raised voice was a threat. To understand that love, real love, doesn't hurt you, it holds you. I won't pretend the scars are gone. They're not. Some days are still hard. But they no longer define who I am. They remind me of what I've overcome. Of what my sister has overcome. Of the strength we didn't know we had until surviving was no longer the only goal. We started with nothing but fear. And now we stand with resilience. There came a moment years later when I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the girl I used to be. The girl who tiptoed through rooms, the one who tried to stay small, silent, invisible. She was still inside me, of course. She always would be. But standing in her place was someone new. Someone steadier. Someone who had walked through fire and come out with scars, yes, but also with strength. And that strength wasn't something I had found all at once. It was built slowly through every choice to keep going, to speak up, to believe in life beyond survival. The journey didn't end when the abuse stopped. It didn't end when we moved in with Grandma. It didn't end when the nightmares faded or the therapy sessions became less frequent. The truth is, it became something deeper. It turned into a purpose. Because once you've walked through something that dark and come out the other side, you start to wonder what you can do with that survival. You start to ask, who else is still in that darkness? And how can I help light the way? So I started sharing my story. Not all at once, not loudly at first, but piece by piece. School with trusted friends. Later at community events. Eventually I spoke to rooms full of people. And every time someone came up to me afterward. Quiet conversation. A whisper. That happened to me too. Or, I thought I was alone. Or, I've never told anyone before. That's when I realized how many of us are carrying invisible wounds. How many children grow up thinking their pain is their fault. How many adults still live with the silence they learned as kids. And I knew I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I owed it to my younger self. I owed it to my sister. I owed it to every person who never had a grandma like ours to step in. I went on to study social work. I wanted to be that person for others. The one who sees what others overlook. The one who doesn't wait until it's too late. I started volunteering with local shelters, mentoring teens, sitting in courtrooms as an advocate for children who didn't yet know how to speak for themselves. And through it all, I kept holding on to the truth I had lived. That love, real love, has the power to interrupt even the deepest cycles of pain. I think about my sister too. The way she came back to herself little by little, in the years that followed. How she found her voice, found joy, found the kind of peace we never imagined possible. She's thriving now, studying art and working with young kids, using her creativity as a kind of soft rebellion against everything we were taught to suppress. She tells her story in her own way, through paintings that hold emotion words can't always carry. And every time I see her smile I think, this is what healing looks like. Not perfect, not painless, but powerful. And of course I think of Grandma, the anchor, the steady hand, the quiet warrior who changed the course of 2 lives without needing recognition. She never asked for praise. She never acted like what she did was extraordinary. But I know better. I know what kind of courage it takes to step in when others turn away. To love children who are grieving things they can't explain. To build a home out of broken pieces and make it stronger than it ever was before. She gave us more than shelter. She gave us the foundation to rebuild ourselves. Even now, when I speak, when I work with young survivors, when I write or mentor or simply listen to someone's story, I carry her with me. Carry all of it. The fear, the pain, the love, the strength. Because every part of that story shaped who I am. And while I wouldn't wish what we went through on anyone, I also wouldn't trade what it taught me. I learned to fight. I learned to forgive. I learned that even in the deepest darkness, love can still take root and grow. And so I stand here not as a victim but as a voice. A reminder that healing is possible. That survival is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of something powerful. Something worth sharing. Something worth fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there will hear this and realize they're not alone. That they, too, can survive. And not just survive but rise.